Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today. We are diving deep into the world of smart cities. We've been seeing a ton of articles about this lately, and you've sent in some really fascinating stuff. So we're going to try to cut through the hype and figure out what's really going on. One company that keeps popping up is Haptic. They're a consulting firm that seems to be involved in a lot of these projects. So let's start there. What do we know about Haptic and their vision for these smart cities of tomorrow?
Well, they're definitely trying to position themselves as the go-to people for making these cities a reality. It's not just about the technology for them, it's about creating a holistic ecosystem. They've got some pretty ambitious strategies outlined, and one thing that jumps out is their focus on smart infrastructure and sustainable energy.
Yeah, those seem like no-brainers, right? I mean, who doesn't want more efficient energy grids and greener transportation?
Sure, but what makes Haptic's approach interesting is how they connect everything. It's not just about having solar panels on roofs or electric buses. It's about creating a system where all these things work together.
Okay, so give me an example. How does that actually play out in a real-world scenario?
Imagine a city where the energy grid can adapt in real time based on data from buildings and even electric vehicles. Let's say it's a sweltering hot day and everyone's cranking up their AC. Traditional grid might get overloaded, but a smart grid could tap into the energy stored in electric vehicle charging stations that aren't being used at that moment. This would prevent blackouts, keep things running smoothly, and make the entire system more efficient.
Okay, I see the potential there, but I also can't help but think about all the data involved. We're talking about massive amounts of information being generated every second about traffic energy use, even people's movements. It makes you wonder about the potential downsides, especially when it comes to privacy.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge concern.
Mhm.
And it's something that Haptic acknowledges directly in their materials. They actually highlight data privacy and security as one of their core strategies for smart city development.
So they're not just throwing technology at the problem and hoping for the best. They're actually thinking about the ethical implications. But how do those concerns actually translate into tangible actions? What are they proposing?
Well, for starters, they emphasize the importance of embedding data privacy considerations into the design of smart city applications from the very beginning. It's not enough to just slap on a privacy policy after the fact. It needs to be baked into the DNA of these technologies.
So it's about being proactive rather than reactive. But even with the best intentions and safeguards in place, I imagine some people will still be wary of all this data floating around.
You're right. And that's why Haptic also stresses the importance of transparency and citizen engagement. They argue that for smart cities to truly work, people need to understand how these systems operate, what data is being collected, and how it's being used.
So it's about giving people a sense of ownership over their data and how it's being used. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the data privacy concerns, but let's shift gears and talk about what it would actually be like to live in one of these smart cities of tomorrow. What are some of the tangible ways this technology could impact our daily lives?
Well, let's take transportation as an example. Imagine you're heading to a meeting across town, and instead of being stuck in traffic, your phone directs you to a less congested route in real time. It could even suggest the best mode of transportation based on your preferences and the city's current conditions.
That would be a game changer for someone like me who spends way too much time stuck in traffic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not as far-fetched as it might seem. Cities like Singapore are already experimenting with smart traffic management systems that adapt to changing conditions and reduce congestion.
It's amazing to think about how these concepts are already being put into practice in some parts of the world.
Absolutely. And while fully integrated smart cities might be a few years off, a lot of the building blocks are already in place. Think about things like contactless payment systems for public transportation, or apps that let you rent bikes or scooters with a few taps on your phone. These are all steps toward creating a more connected and efficient urban environment.
Right. So the technology is already starting to reshape our cities in subtle but significant ways. But what about the human element? Earlier, we talked about citizen engagement, and I'm curious to see how Haptic envisions that playing out.
They highlight a couple of really interesting examples. One is using data and technology to make it easier for citizens to participate in local decision-making. Imagine a city using an app to poll residents on where to build a new park or to get real-time feedback on proposed infrastructure projects.
It's like taking the pulse of the city in real time.
Exactly. And this isn't just theoretical. Some cities are already experimenting with these kinds of participatory platforms. For instance, Barcelona has a digital platform that allows citizens to propose and vote on projects for improving their neighborhoods, using city data to inform their decisions and track progress.
I love that idea. It gives people a real sense of ownership over their communities. But on a more practical level, how do these ideas actually get implemented? Because it's one thing to have ambitious plans, but it's another thing entirely to actually turn them into reality. And that's where I think haptics' role as this bridge between different stakeholders becomes really crucial.
Right, Haptic's not just coming up with these ideas in a vacuum. They're working directly with cities, tech companies, researchers, and even citizens to figure out how to make these smart city solutions a reality. They're like the conductors of an orchestra, bringing together all these different players and making sure they're all working in harmony.
I like that analogy because with something as complex as building a smart city, you need someone to orchestrate all the moving parts.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that Haptic sees its role as more than just a consultant. They're actively investing in research and development, partnering with universities and startups to push the boundaries of what's possible in the realm of smart city technology.
So they're not just helping to implement existing solutions, they're actively trying to shape the future of urban innovation.
Precisely.
That's an interesting point, and it kind of brings us to this quote that I saw from Haptic CEO Mr. Daniel Churz. He talks about creating a more connected urban ecosystem. What's your take on that? Is it just marketing fluff, or is there real substance behind those words?
I think it reflects a deeper understanding of what it takes to create truly smart cities. It's not just about having the latest gadgets and gizmos. It's about creating a system where all these different elements, technology, infrastructure, governance, and most importantly, people are all interconnected and working together in a way that benefits everyone.
Right, because at the end of the day, technology should be a tool for improving people's lives, not just an end in itself.
Exactly. And that's a message that seems to be at the heart of Haptic's approach to smart city development.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Haptic's vision and their role in this whole smart city ecosystem, but I'm also curious about the broader context here. What are some other factors that are shaping the future of cities beyond the work of any one company?
That's a great question, and there are definitely a lot of factors at play. One thing that's impossible to ignore is the increasing urbanization of our planet. We're living in an era where more people are living in cities than ever before, and that trend is only going to continue in the coming decades.
Right, and that puts a lot of pressure on cities to become more efficient, more livable, and more sustainable.
Exactly. And it's not just about accommodating more people. It's about creating cities that are equitable, resilient, and responsive to the needs of all their citizens.
And that's where I guess this whole concept of smart cities comes in. It's about using technology as a tool to address some of these really complex challenges.
Absolutely. And while technology alone isn't a silver bullet, it has the potential to play a transformative role in shaping the cities of the future.
So it sounds like we're on the cusp of a pretty significant shift in how cities function right. But as with any big change, I imagine there are going to be some bumps along the way. What are some of the challenges that cities are facing as they try to navigate this transition to a smarter future?
That's a great question. And you're right, there are definitely challenges. One of the biggest is the issue of equity. How do you make sure that these smart city solutions benefit everyone, not just the wealthy or tech savvy?
That's a crucial point. It wouldn't be much of a smart city if it only worked for a select few.
Exactly. And it's not just about access to technology. It's about making sure that everyone has a voice in shaping how these technologies are implemented. Cities need to find ways to bridge the digital divide and ensure that everyone feels included in this transition.
And that probably involves more than just providing free Wi-Fi in public spaces, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It requires a more holistic approach, one that addresses the underlying social and economic disparities that can exacerbate the digital divide. For example, cities can invest in digital literacy programs, provide affordable internet access, and work to ensure that smart city solutions are designed with accessibility in mind.
So it's about making sure that these technologies are truly inclusive and empower everyone in the community. But beyond those social considerations, I imagine there are also some pretty significant technological hurdles to overcome.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Building a smart city requires a massive amount of data, and that data needs to be collected, stored, and analyzed in a secure and efficient way.
And I imagine that's no small feat, especially when you consider the sheer scale and complexity of a modern city.
Exactly. And it's not just about the technology itself. It's about creating the infrastructure and the governance frameworks to support these data-driven systems. Cities are going to have to make significant investments in things like high-speed internet data storage and cybersecurity, and they're going to need to develop new policies and regulations to govern the collection and use of data in a responsible and ethical way.
It sounds like a daunting task, but also an
Yeah.
incredibly exciting one. We're talking about building the cities of the future, and that's a pretty incredible opportunity. So for our listener out there who's fascinated by all of this, what would you say is the key takeaway? What should they be paying attention to as these smart cities start to take shape around the world?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed and engaged. The future of our cities is being written right now, and it's a conversation that we all need to be a part of.
And how can people get involved?
There are lots of ways. Start by learning about what your own city is doing in this space. Many cities have websites or public forums dedicated to smart city initiatives. Attend city council meetings, join community groups, and make your voice heard.
It's about being an active citizen in the digital age.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and demand transparency. The more we all understand about these technologies and how they're being implemented, the better equipped we'll be to shape the cities of the future in a way that benefits everyone.
That's a fantastic point to end on. The future of our cities is in our hands, and it's up to all of us to shape it in a way that is both innovative and equitable. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of smart cities. We'll be keeping a close eye on this space as it continues to evolve. Until next time, stay curious.
That's an interesting point, and it kind of brings us to this quote that I saw from Haptics CEO Mr. Daniel Churtz. He talks about creating a more connected urban ecosystem. What's your take on that? Is it just marketing fluff, or is there real substance behind those words?
I think it speaks to a deeper understanding of what it takes to build a smart city. It's not just about cool gadgets. It's about creating a system where technology, infrastructure, governance, and people all work together.
Right, so it's about more than just the tech itself. It's about how that tech integrates with every aspect of city life. Exactly. And how it impacts the lives of the people who live there.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Haptics Vision and their role in this whole smart city ecosystem. But I'm also curious about the bigger picture. What are some other things shaping the future of cities beyond, any one company?
Well, one of the biggest factors is urbanization. More and more people are moving to cities every day, and that trend isn't slowing down anytime soon.
Right, and that puts a ton of pressure on cities to adapt, to become more efficient, more livable, and more sustainable.
Exactly. And it's not just about cramming more people in. It's about creating cities that are fair, resilient, and responsive to everyone's needs.
And that's where I guess this whole idea of smart cities comes in,
Right.
using tech to tackle these complex challenges.
Absolutely. And while tech isn't a magic solution on its own, it has the potential to completely change how cities function in the future.
So it sounds like we're on the verge of a major shift in how cities operate. But like with any big change, there are going to be some growing pains. What are some challenges cities are facing as they try to become smarter?
One of the biggest challenges is equity. How do you ensure that these smart city solutions benefit everyone, not just the wealthy or those who are tech savvy?
That's a critical point because a smart city that only works for a privileged few isn't really that smart, is it?
Exactly. And it's not just about access to tech. It's about ensuring everyone has a say in how these technologies are used. Cities need to bridge the digital divide and make sure no one feels left behind in this transition.
And that probably takes more than just offering free Wi-Fi at the library, right?
Definitely. It requires a more comprehensive strategy, one that addresses those underlying social and economic disparities that can make the digital divide even worse. For example, cities can invest in things like digital literacy programs, provide affordable internet, and design smart city solutions with accessibility in mind from the get-go.
So it's about ensuring these technologies are truly inclusive and empower everyone in the community. But even with those social considerations taken care of, I'm sure there are also some pretty big technological hurdles to overcome as well.
Oh, absolutely. Building a smart city requires a ton of data, and that data has to be collected, stored, and analyzed in a way that's both secure and efficient.
And I imagine that's no easy feat, especially when you think about just how massive and intricate a modern city is.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the technology itself. You also need the right infrastructure and governance frameworks to support these data-driven systems. Cities will need to invest heavily in things like high-speed internet, data storage, cybersecurity, and they'll need to develop new policies and regulations to manage data collection and use responsibly and ethically.
It sounds like a massive undertaking, but also an incredibly exciting one. We're talking about shaping the cities of tomorrow. It's a huge opportunity. So, for our listeners who are captivated by all of this, what's the main takeaway? What should they be paying attention to as these smart cities start to emerge around the world?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed and engaged. The decisions being made today are going to shape the future of our cities. So we all need to be a part of that conversation.
And how can people get involved? What can they do to have their voices heard?
There are tons of ways to get involved. Start by finding out what your own city is doing in this space. Many cities have websites or forums dedicated to smart city projects. You can attend city council meetings, join community groups, and speak up.
It's about being an active and informed citizen in our increasingly digital world.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask tough questions, challenge assumptions, and demand transparency. The more we understand about these technologies and how they're being implemented, the better equipped we'll be to shape the future of our cities in a way that benefits everyone.
That's a fantastic point to wrap up on. It's in our hands to make sure the future of our cities is innovative, equitable, and truly serves the needs of everyone. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of smart cities. We'll continue to follow this topic closely as it develops. Until next time, stay curious.
So it sounds like we're on the cusp of a pretty big change in how cities work, right? Like a real turning point.
Yeah, I think so.
But like you were saying earlier, with any big change, there are always going to be challenges, things to watch out for. What are some of the obstacles cities might face as they try to make this leap towards a smarter future?
Well, one of the biggest ones is making sure these changes are fair for everyone.
Hmm.
Like, how do we make sure that these smart city solutions don't just benefit the wealthy or the people who are already comfortable with technology? That's a really important point. You're right. It wouldn't be a very smart city if it only worked for a small portion of the population.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just having access to technology. It's also about making sure that everybody has a voice in how these technologies are used. Cities need to find ways to close that digital divide we hear so much about and make sure that everybody feels included in this transition to a smarter city.
And that probably involves a lot more than just setting up free Wi-Fi hotspots in parks and libraries.
Oh,
So,
definitely. It's a much bigger conversation. It means looking at the social and economic factors that contribute to the digital divide in the first place. For example, cities can invest in digital literacy programs to help people get up to speed. They can work to provide more affordable internet access, and they can make sure that smart city solutions are designed with accessibility in mind right from the start.
so it's really about making sure that these technologies are truly inclusive and that they empower everyone in the community, not just a select few. But beyond those social considerations, I'm sure there are also some pretty big technological hurdles that need to be cleared as well.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Building a smart city requires a tremendous amount of data. And all that data has to be collected, stored, and analyzed in a way that's both secure and efficient.
And I imagine that's a pretty tall order, especially when you consider the sheer size and complexity of a modern city.
It definitely is. And it's not just about the technology itself. It's about having the right infrastructure and governance frameworks in place to support these data-driven systems. Cities are going to have to invest heavily in things like high-speed internet data storage and cybersecurity measures. And they're going to have to develop new policies and regulations to make sure that all this data is collected and used responsibly and ethically.
It sounds like an incredibly complex undertaking, but it also sounds incredibly exciting. I mean, we're talking about literally building the cities of the future. So for our listeners who are intrigued by this whole conversation about smart cities, what would you say is the most important thing for them to remember? What should they be paying attention to as these technologies continue to evolve?
Honestly, I think the most important thing is to stay informed and to stay engaged. This is a conversation that's happening right now, and the decisions that are being made today are going to have a real impact on the cities of tomorrow. So we all need to be a part of that discussion.
And what are some practical ways that people can get involved? How can they make their voices heard?
There are tons of ways to get involved. Start by finding out what your own city is doing in this area. A lot of cities have websites or online forums that are dedicated to smart city initiatives. You can also attend city council meetings, join community groups, write to your elected officials. There are so many ways to make your voice heard.
It's about being an active and informed citizen in the digital age, right?
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask tough questions. Challenge assumptions. And demand transparency from the people who are making these decisions. The more we all understand about these technologies and how they're being used, the better equipped we'll be to create cities that are truly smart, sustainable, and equitable for everyone.
That's a fantastic note to end on. The future of our cities really is in our hands, and it's up to all of us to ensure that this future is one that benefits everyone. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of smart cities. It's a topic that we'll definitely be revisiting as these technologies continue to develop. Until next time, stay curious.